Today's guest is licensed marriage and family therapist, Karin Weiri. Karin is a sought-after speaker on trauma, anxiety and depression, marriage enhancement, divorce, and healthy lifestyle management. She's also the author of Achieving Peace, Purpose, and Prosperity, which focuses on how to overcome obstacles and build the life you want. We'll talk about all that and much, much more during today's installment of Next Steps Forward with our guest, the former Voice America podcaster, Karin Weiri. Happy New Year and welcome to Next Steps Forward.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you so much for having me. It's always fun to be back on where I spent a couple of years.
Great to have you with us. And apologies, I'm not sure if everyone's hearing my mean Shih Tzu Zeke bark at the mailman, but he's upstairs. So the joys of COVID and working from home. So Karin, let's talk about you first and then jump into some other topics after that. I find a lot of therapists are drawn to the profession because they're driven to help others, while others are motivated by their own life experiences. What drew you to become a family and marriage therapist?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. It was a combination of both. I saw very much how intergenerational trauma affected, went from my grandmother to my mother and then to me, in a very small family that I have, and how each layer, each generation passed it on in a different way. And I have always been somebody who's very determined to let's figure out, how do we resolve this? How do we make things better? And how do we live our fullest life? And that's what I then dove into, because I got to experience for myself the disconnect there is when there is this unresolved trauma, and then took my own time to resolve my stuff. And there's just nothing better than working with someone and seeing them come out of their shell, literally right in front of my eyes. So.
I also know that many therapists experience burnout at one time or another in their careers, and especially as we're in the midst of grueling COVID 3.0, 4.0 pandemic, wherever we are, some are leaving the profession altogether for roles that take less of an emotional toll on them. What is it about your practice that keeps you motivated and excited about what you do?
It's really a mindset situation, because I live in a different world than a lot of other people live in, where there are just some things that don't really exist. It's not part of my life. And so and for me, is in the beginning, when I had some concerns about what was going on personally, for me, it really helped to dive in and focus on helping other people through their stuff. So I got out of myself and into helping other people. But the other part that's really important in any profession, but especially where you're working to help other people to prevent burnout, is to really always be checking in with yourself. Where am I with regards to, I don't want to talk to anybody anymore. I need to take care of myself. I need to hang out with the people I need to hang out with. I need to exercise. I need to, keep myself strong and healthy in every which way. And when we balance all of that out, we can prevent it. But I think it's also very much figuring out which population is your population to work with, because there are some areas that are much more demanding and will suck the life out of you if that's not your spot.
So was it more of a calling for you, just given your personal experiences?
I think so. I actually originally wanted to become a physical therapist. So I've always been about let's helping people and getting people healthy and in a better place. And then I got a job when I first came here, and I was doing my initial classes, initial college classes. And I was working with a physical therapist who was quite burnt out, and it just seemed very repetitive to me, the work that was going on, and I have had a totally skewed experience myself. But that's where I went to, well, if I'm not going to do that, let me go ahead and focus on something that I find is really interesting also, which is relationships. How do we make relationships better?
A moment ago, you mentioned checking in with yourself. As we're, January 3rd, new year, new resolutions, again, COVID 2 years, 3 years now. What can we do to check in with ourselves?
I think it very much comes to this is a lot of what I teach people when I work with people, is to pay attention. How are you feeling in different situations? So let's say, for example, a big one that I use, for a very long time is, for example, with the news. How do you feel when you turn on the news and just having it's always negative stuff spewed at you? Do you notice yourself going into feeling anxious, feeling depressed, feeling hopeless? Turn it off, because when we actually go out into the world, while there's some of that stuff going on that they're talking about, that is not all that's going on. There's a million other things that are going on. So notice these things, whether it's what you're listening to, what you're watching, what you're reading, who you're spending time with, and notice, where is your energy? What are your moods? Are you shifting from one state, as in mood, to another? And is it going to a place that makes you feel better or makes you feel worse, whether about the world or about yourself? And then fine tuning and using that, it's kind of like your internal barometer, um, for what's going on and what's good for you, because what's good for you might not be good for me and vice versa. And it's all okay.
And you also mentioned being selective about who you hang out with. I had a guest on a few weeks ago, and she talked about going through a period where she actually had to fire friends because they weren't good for her. They weren't good for her psyche, all of that. Is that something you see a lot of the people you treat go through?
Um, some, I don't have a lot of people who necessarily talk about it, but I certainly went through that myself. And that I felt a lot of guilt about, having to fire some of them, because they had been really instrumental in a part of my life, but they were, just very angry, negative people, not angry at me, but angry at the world and politics. And I can't do that.
Life's too short.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, totally understand.
Yeah.
So, what are the biggest challenges that families and couples face today? And what is it about those challenges that make them the most problematic?
I That's a big question right there.
Very broad.
Very broad. So some of the things, because I do work, the majority of what I work with is individuals and couples. No, I don't do families. That's too many people for me too overwhelming. Couples is enough. But what I find many times is that couples, people, what they get into is well, all of our brains are designed to look for negative things. So we really have to practice and build a new muscle in regards to looking for what actually is working. What do I actually appreciate? And and then there's a lot also of, because we all as human beings have experiences that we've had where we see something and immediately we have a story going on in our own head, and that's what we're really paying more attention to, as opposed to what the other person is saying or doing. And then we totally misinterpret what the other person's intention is, or what's going on with them. And when we do that a lot, or exclusively in some cases, then there's that complete disconnect and deterioration in the relationship. So it really becomes a lot about building the ability to zoom out and see ourselves. I see my own emotions, what's going on. Oh, I recognize I'm getting really fired up. Maybe I need to take a little break. Maybe I'm misinterpreting what the other person is saying. Take a break. Let me see from the other person. Maybe that person isn't having a bad intention, you know. So
Well, that's an interesting point, is looking at a topic or an issue from the other person's shoes or their perspective. I know I rarely do that. Is that something that we can train ourselves to do, or to be more conscious about it, as opposed to just saying it's my way or the highway and that's it, and just not being open-minded to someone else's views or perspectives?
absolutely. And I think the big thing is to hear the other person out. Many times we don't hear each other out. And it's funny because they show that in movies all the time, and where somebody's getting ready to say something really instrumental that is going to be the turning point in their relationship, and the other person is immediately like, I already know what you're gonna say, blah 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 blah, and then they miss the whole point. And and we do this in relationships all the time. I'm like, I just want to tell people, shh, if the other person's still talking, unless they're having a long 30-minute monologue, then you might want to curb how much you're saying in one sentence, in one mouthful, but to really hear not just the words of what they're saying. And then the other part, and these are skills and tools, I put those together, schools, skills and tools that we can learn, and that I work with people when I work with couples to, okay, so let's let this person first say something. And then the other person, what did you hear? Tell your partner what you heard them say. And then they get to say if they got it or not, or you got this, but you missed this, and this, that, and the other, and then validate and empathize with them before, and think about a solution before we switch roles. And that's definitely a tool, and it takes practice, and it feels awkward in the beginning. However, that's something that can really be a huge tool in helping couples be able to work through stuff.
I had a guest on a few months ago who was in an experience like you mentioned in the movies where they cut him off and they, think they know what they're going to say. And then she said, "What I learned from that is that God gave me 2 ears and one mouth and keep my mouth shut and my ears open." So
Exactly.
we'll simple it down a little bit, I guess, for folks like me.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
along that line, we know that relationship dynamics have changed over time. Years ago, men were the traditional breadwinners. Mom stayed at home and raised the kids. Today, mom can make more money than dad, or more often, both mom and dad have to work to make ends meet. How have each of those changes reshaped the way family units interact?
Yeah, I think it can go either way. It was as with everything in life. And on one hand, it can definitely provide a lot more opportunity, for both people to maybe go out and build their dreams and support each other if there are people who are working together. There's also the other part where sometimes, and that was the case for me, where my son was not doing well in daycare, and where I saw, and I've seen this in quite a few cases where I actually quit my job for a while, and then I started my private practice, but that takes a while to build, and stayed with him to because he needed me. And sometimes, when kids are little, they want mom and dad. That's, and that helped him become calmer and more settled. And while it was an extremely stressful part of our life financially and everything, I would I would do it all over again, because to me that was totally the turnaround for him. So mm,
Another change is that young people are waiting longer to get married and fewer couples are having kids. Those relationships would seem to have far fewer stressors than the traditional family structure, yet many of those relationships are fracturing too. In your experience, why do those relationships come apart and how can we prevent them from ending badly?
and this is something where um I think it's a good thing to hold off and wait and be very conscious about, do we want kids or do we not, and live our own lives. But it comes again to the part of, well, first of all, having young children is going to be the most stressful part of your life. Anybody who has them,
Amen.
right? If you're ever having a kid to resolve the relationship, you're going the wrong way. It's more likely to break it up than not. So that part of really recognizing this is just a stressful few years that we're going through. Are we going to hunker down and get through it? The other part is, again, that part of many times it's really other relationship, other past experiences that we've had, they get triggered and play out, and and cause problems in the relationship.
Generalizations can often be off the mark, but how has the COVID pandemic affected couples and what can we do to minimize those impacts?
Yeah, that's one of the sad things about what has happened in the domestic abuse cases have gone way up. Alcohol overdoses, not just for couples, but even also for kids, for teenagers who have been isolated and such. So it's really a very, probably caused more problems the way we responded than, if we hadn't done lockdowns and all that kind of thing, because people lost hope and then they were stuck at home, especially in relationships where maybe there were already issues. And child abuse cases went way up. It's so scary and sad. um and so again, it's about really, um well, when we're usually those kinds of things, it's because there's something else that's going on that we haven't resolved in ourselves. So, power and control issues is always at the root of where there's domestic violence. Um, and with alcohol and drug issues, it's usually to cover up emotional pain, and basically self-medicating. So, yeah, to get to where those things started is really the best thing. And and what I was telling people, whether it was couples or individuals, was from the beginning, you need to go outside. You have to go out and get some fresh air, move your body, do this kind of stuff, because you get a fresh perspective, literally. Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned going outside. I've been working in my basement now for almost 2 years, and there are no windows down here. And so thankfully I've got the dogs. And so I have to literally get up from my desk every 3 hours and go get some fresh air. And like you said, refresh out there. So that's, great advice for everybody as somebody who's living it every day. And I know one cause for friction in some families is unmet expectations. A spouse's career isn't as successful as the other expects. A child doesn't get to the college they expected to. Maybe the family doesn't make as much money as they'd hoped to, or live in as big of a house. How can we diffuse any unmet expectations so they don't fester and create bigger
Mm.
problems?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think many times I think that really has to do with learning that life is, sometimes it's like a river, that and the river curves, and sometimes there might be something around the corner that we didn't expect. And in order to live a successful life, not as in getting a lot of money, but as in being able to manage your life and your relationships, is really to be able to flow more with what's going on. And kind of like what Bruce Lee, to be like water. and that, okay, so, well, if you aren't making the kind of money that you want, are you still liking what you're doing? Are you getting enjoyment out of it? Or do you need to maybe look into shifting career? Maybe you need to go to technical college, uh, with regards to a kid not getting into the college that they wanted to, or the parents wanted to. Is this kid really college, somebody who wants to go to college? My kid is not somebody who wants to go to college. And I've always been good with that, because I don't think always college isn't for everybody. And so to really see who is this person, what is the good that we have. And this is where we then step into appreciation and gratitude, and seeing what is it that's going well, and can we put more energy into those areas so that those areas grow, because what we focus on grows always.
So looking at it with the glass half full versus half empty, a
Right,
positive
right.
approach.
And maybe we just need a tweak, as opposed to doing a whole, "Oh, we gotta get rid of the whole glass and start over with a new one."
I know someone who extricates himself from other people's drama by simply saying, not my circus, not my monkeys. It seems to work for him, but that would seem to be pretty difficult to do when interacting with people who live under the same roof. What is the best way to prevent ourselves from being caught up in other people's drama?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good one. Because, like you said, I mean, it's a really good point. If it's not somebody that you live with, then that's what you can do. And I think that's a good policy generally, to really recognize what part is my journey and what part is their journey. And it goes the same with somebody who's in your household. So let's just say it's your spouse or partner that um it that's a big question. Because, um, yeah, because sometimes, the one side or, likes to really poke the bear and poke and poke and poke, and, that's where we have to have enough respect to let the other person, if they need a break, to let them have their break, and then let's come back. And the challenge is when one or both people is not, again, willing to listen to the other and really see the other person's point of view. And then also it depends on, okay, so is the partner complaining about maybe their career, their, something that's outside of the relationship, as opposed to something that's has to do with the relationship, that's much more challenging if it's in. And that's where, well, if that's continuing to go on, you might want to seek outside help and, um, have somebody else come in and help negotiate that. But if it's something with work, then it might be something that maybe to talk about, well, do you just need a vent? Maybe sometimes we just need a vent. We just need to, just debrief, get it out of a system. And then it's like, whew, that feels good. And then you can maybe just be, if you're hearing it a lot, it's like, maybe in your mind, go somewhere else and and smile and nod. And it's like, oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Are you ready to look for another job? Maybe.
That's the right question right there. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've noted that the first 6 years of life is when we learn the majority about how the world works and how we interact with other people.
Yeah.
Those experiences become anchored, cemented in the brain, if you will, and the brain is the place from which we react and behave 90% of the time. Given that childhood is so important in shaping who we are, do you think it would be beneficial for children in that age group to go to therapy so they can make more sense of what they are, what they're learning, and how they are interacting with others as they go along?
And another great question. And I think this is where it would be even better if the parents prepared themselves before having the children, preferably. But if they don't get to it before they have, then at least while the children are young. And if they need to, they go to therapy, because it's that part of when we have resolved our own inner issues that are going on, our the needs that we didn't feel like we had met, and the bad relationships and expectations and all that kind of thing, then we are much better prepared to, provide for this child and you know just really creating little people who are ready to just soar. It's like you can do whatever you want, whatever, and really then back that up. That, okay, well, if you want to build a tremendous lawn care business as opposed to going to college, then you really support that. um, but that really having that, and because you have to also model it. You can't just say it. Oh, do as I say, not as I do. That doesn't work.
Let's switch gears and talk about trauma. You believe that an important first step in treatment is to determine what unresolved trauma, big and not so big, someone has experienced. Why is that so important as you look to treat somebody?
Yeah, because what happens is that the how we experience life is that everything first goes through different parts of the brain, and it hits first the old part of the brain that's way back by our brain stem. That's not the smart part of our brain. It's just there to make sure, okay, am I safe or am I not? And because if I'm not safe, then immediately I need to go ahead and protect this body here that I'm carrying around, and that can be very subtle, and how we then react in that moment is that the brain goes into a level of fight, flight, or freeze. And then when all this stuff is going on, it freezes in the worst part of the situation, which we attach a negative belief about ourselves in that moment. And that's what then gets replayed. And that's from which we drive our bus subconsciously. So that's why that's really important.
You said that in addition to the prevalence of unresolved traumas, the critical problem is that too often diagnoses are made too early. It seems like the best thing to do is to get to the root of a problem as early as possible. What are negative results of a too early diagnosis?
Well, I think many times we kind of latch onto, oh, well, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, and almost as though that's who I am and that's who I am going to be forever. And many times, medication is like the first thing that we go to, and there is a time and a place for it. But many times, then we don't really get to really resolve what caused it in the first place. And when we're more asking about symptoms, are you experiencing these symptoms? Then that could be a lot of different things. So.
And what are the connections or the misdiagnosed connections between unresolved trauma and depression or post-traumatic stress? Isn't unresolved trauma the basis of post-traumatic stress?
Yes, absolutely. And to me, that's more about that. I think a lot of people, they have the belief that, oh, PTSD, that's something, post-traumatic stress, that's something. Then once you have it for the rest of your life, as opposed to you went through something that wasn't good, that was unexpected, unpleasant, traumatic, whatever. And we can go back and heal those emotional wounds so that you do not continue to live the rest of your life with PTSD or with depression or with anxiety or all those other things, because all those diagnoses are things. ADHD, can be things that look like, your reaction from the PTSD and the trauma can look like all those other things. And that's my point with that.
Karin, is there a single best way to treat trauma in your opinion, or does the treatment approach really depend on the client's personal history?
I think it depends a lot on the person's history. And personally, for me, I utilize EMDR mostly, and we'll get into that a little bit. But I have found that at least the population that I seem to attract into my practice respond incredibly well to that. And I use it as quickly as possible, sometimes even in the first session, just to get people going. And usually people, they can feel it right away. It's a relief. They have hope. They can see improvements right away. And that's what I want to give people as quickly as possible.
You mentioned being an advocate of the treatment modality called EMDR. What does EMDR stand for and how does it work?
Yeah, so it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And what it does, just like I talked about right before the break, how traumatic memories are stored in a very different way. They get stored frozen with the worst part in that moment of when something's happening, and with the negative belief we attach in that moment. And now it gets stored and connected with all the other events we've had where we attach the same negative beliefs. So we start building these, not subconsciously, these big neural pathways of I'm not good enough, it's my fault, I'm unlovable. So imagine how all those, when they get triggered, which triggers a hair fine, it pulls up all of the events that have happened that are stuck and frozen in the worst parts and get replayed as though they're happening right here and now. And this is why I say that people, they might look like they have ADHD because they're all fired up, or they look like they have anxiety because they're all fired up, or they have depression because it's like, oh, all those events that happened there, they were really sucky. And you like my technical terms.
Technical term, exactly.
Yeah. So what we do is we zero in on one specific event because the brain can focus on that. And then we figure out what is the negative belief that you attach with it? What are the emotions that are coming up now? What are the physical sensations? That part throws people off many times. Like, what do I feel in my body? What are you talking about? And this is where people while we're doing EMDR also really get trained to can tune into themselves, like we talked about in the beginning of the show. And then we get a measurements. How upsetting is it now? And what do we want to replace that negative belief with? Something positive, and then get a measurement on that. And then this is going to sound weird. We add bilateral stimulation, which could be eye movements from side to side. It could be they have headphones where the beep goes from side to side, or I have a little machine that has these little paddles and that buzz. You hold one in each hand, and that's how you get your bilateral stimulation there. What the bilateral stimulation does is it helps to relax the nervous system. So now the brain doesn't go back into that fight, flight, or freeze situation where basically we're working with half a brain, because only the right side of the brain is lit up. And that's why we can't process and integrate those memories properly without the bilateral stimulation. So, and that's how people get to where they feel like they're in the middle of the situation. It doesn't matter if it was 30 years ago, when you were 5 years old, or it was yesterday. And it goes from that to, it was like it happened to somebody else. I see it from a third party, and it's over there, and the body relaxes. So many beautiful things start happening.
And what is the effectiveness rate of EMDR? Has it proven to be more effective for some groups of people than others?
Um, so I did not look up numbers, so but I would have to say, for the people that I work with, I would say, ballpark estimate, I would say up around 95% that I work with, if not more, because I've literally had people who came in and fell apart on my couch crying, and I just put the tappers in their hands and just talk and cry and do this. When I wasn't able to do the actual protocol. And then, a few minutes into doing this, they're starting to look at the pedals like, wow, what is this? What, can I take this home? And by the time they're done with the session, they're like smiling and feeling much better. And, they put themselves together again. Now, one of the things that we really do need to pay attention to, if we can do EMDR with somebody, is if you are able to change state, with that meaning going from, okay, I can shift from feeling anxious to, if I help you through some exercises, then I can get to feeling more calm. Because we do have to have the ability to keep one leg in the present and one leg in the past. So,
And once trauma has been resolved, is it possible to experience episodes again when we encounter the person or situation that caused that trauma?
yeah. So what I have heard from people is that, for example, let's say you resolve something to do with your mom, let's just say. And what people find is that they have a whole different, much better relationship with their mom after that, because they're able to. It's no longer replaying old tapes in your head. We have a new tape. Where you're able to stay in the present moment. And so if there's something else that triggers people, it could be just because there was something else that would be good to process. But what we find is that if they are triggered, they're not triggered way high. There's just the small things like, oh, I noticed this. And but I was okay. So people really find, and it's been shown in research, how not only do we resolve past things, but people have a much better ability to deal with stressors in the future.
You've said that for many people, and not everyone, but for many, just 6 to 9 sessions can make a significant difference in their mental health challenges. Stories about seeing a therapist forever are so common that they're cliche. How is it possible to make significant progress in such a short number of sessions when for years we've been told the treatment is a long, slow, arduous process?
Mm. And that's exactly why I love EMDR so much, because it goes in and we have an opportunity. It's almost like rewiring the brain, and we're unplugging from all that negative, the negative self-beliefs that we have, that we've connected into, that's been driving our subconscious. So when we unplug from that, and not only are we unplugging from that in the EMDR process, we're also plugging into strengths That's why I love to get to do EMDR as quickly as possible with people that are ready and willing to. And the most of the people that I attract to me, they hear me talk about, and there's like, let's do it. And I'm like, all right, you're my people, let's do it. Uh, because I really encourage people to, I don't want to make them dependent on me. I want people to um, really resolve things and have tools. And then what I have a certain number of my clients, they'll pop in, kind of do a little maintenance here and there, maybe once a year or a couple of years or something like that. So
You and I were talking a few weeks ago, and you were discussing the ripple effect that the right therapy can have. You said that as we make big changes in our own lives, we can change the lives of our spouses, children, and coworkers, and even future generations. The mention of influencing how future generations behave is really, honestly, quite profound. Can you dive in that topic? Because we're often told that we can change ourselves, but we really can't expect to change others.
right. And that's a really good distinction there, because it goes back to what I was when you asked me the question about should children go to therapy, and I said, well, it would be good if parents went to therapy and resolved themselves. And this is how we make that intergenerational ripple effect, because now that I am not getting triggered by my kid throwing food on the table, because let's just say my mom would be screaming at me if I made any mess, and now I'm all triggered, and I can't have my kid do this, but they're 2 years old, so that's what 2 year olds do. Yeah, so I'm screaming my head off, but by resolving that now is like, okay, this is not my mom, I'm not in that state anymore, this is my 2 year old child, and this is what 2 year olds do, and I'm just going to take a deep breath, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clean it up and do what I need to do, move on with my life. And that's how we can do this. So let's say, for example, with my spouse, because I'm not getting hysterical and getting triggered over the mess, then I'm not yelling at my spouse because he's not cleaning it up as quickly enough for me. And instead, now, so it's in these subtle ways. So now he's not getting, triggered by me because I'm attacking him. And that's how we do it.
That's the ripple effect.
Yes.
All right, now let's get into some fun part of the conversation. Your book. Achieving Peace, Purpose, and Prosperity provides a roadmap in some sense to make those big changes in our lives you're talking about. Tell us about the book, which I believe is also a workbook, right?
It is. Yes. Yes. And here's my non-human baby that I birthed last fall.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Just in time
It
for the
was
tax write-off.
it was almost a bigger job than birthing my human baby, but but yeah, so I do actually share a little bit about my own experiences, just so that people can recognize, I was not tortured or beaten or anything like that, but to also show, first of all, I do practice what I preach, and also that it is some of these more subtle things that can have indelible effects on how we feel about ourselves, how we show up in life and in relationships and such. And at the end of each chapter, there are questions and there are places to put things and write, so that as you are going through this, and I talk about everything from energy to values to like you were talking about, creating your your group of people that are your support group, true support group, not the people we think we should be paying attention to. And there's also actually a chapter in here from a former client of mine that shared her experience of working with me and what it did for her. So yeah.
And where can people find your book?
It is available on Amazon and on Barnes and Noble online.
Perfect. We'll put it out on social media as well so people can track it there as well.
Thank you.
So a moment ago, we were talking about future generations. Let's talk about previous generations. You mentioned earlier in the show about you, your mother, your grandmother. We shoulder a lot of baggage from our parents, including the baggage they carry from their parents, the baggage they carry from theirs, and so on and so on. Why do we carry so much old baggage around? Do we like to be miserable? Do we not know how to unload our baggage? What's going on there?
Yeah, it really is a lot about, again, conditioning, and many times it's not taught. For example, in with growing up with my mom, we didn't communicate. It was not about talking about things and resolving things. So that was not modeled for me. So that was really another reason, probably why I was intrigued by going into this profession, because I wanted to learn. I wanted to learn really how to communicate and establish good relationships. So it's modeling. We do what we see, and it's that subconscious. We just do it automatically because we're 90% of the time we're on autopilot after a certain age, until we decide, wait a minute, let me pay a little bit of attention and see what's going on, and is this working for me or is it not? um, and and then and many times it might be part of the culture, where it's spoken or unspoken, of we don't air our dirty laundry. We don't speak about these things, or there's stigma tied to a lot of things, like, oh no, you can't, you're just going to be showing like you're crazy, and it's going to be you that's the bad person. Yeah. So a lot of these things hold us back and keep us stuck,
And you
sadly.
feel that, given the COVID pandemic and how there's been such a spotlight put on mental health of everybody, and in a positive way, you just use the word stigma. you know, I've been talking for months now during COVID on the show about the mental health tsunami that's coming after this. Well, the tsunami's here because we're still in the middle of this. You know, what can we do to help kick that stigma?
I think talking more openly about it, like here, so thank you for providing a platform for it. That this is really more about, people don't think twice about going to the doctor or going to the dentist. And if you think about how really there's plenty of research these days now that show that 80 to 90% of our chronic physical illnesses are really caused by not taking care of our mental stress. Um, and so if we can get to where we can take care of that and make that a high priority, we will really see our people thriving rather than just hanging on for dear life and just making it go by. Think about this, how relationships will be higher quality, thriving, which would then cause, that we've just been talking about, cause a higher quality environment for the kids to grow up in. And then that's what they're going to be doing. So yeah, I think it's really huge.
From my work in the veterans mental health space, I've learned about so many treatment methods outside of medication that are exceptionally effective. Unfortunately, it not only seems like medication is often the first go-to for physicians and patients, but a lot of the population remains unaware of alternative treatments. We've talked about EMDR and frequency therapies. What other treatments do you offer or favor that are outside the realm of traditional medication?
Yeah, I always looking for ways, things that will help our body rebuild and repair and support it, because our bodies are really this amazing machinery, if you will, creation that is designed to move towards health, as long as we provide it with an environment that's conducive to it. And that's where the supplements that I recommend they're all things that I use myself. Everything that I say is something I use myself, so I see results myself, and I know that it's helping other people. And there's another thing that's called frequency therapy that I use with some of my clients, where it uses microcurrents on one level, and it uses another distance energy, where it's harmonizing your field, your energy field. um, with the microcurrents, it's helping the cell membranes communicate in a way that it's bringing them back into uh, home. What is it? I lost the word.
Harmony?
Harmony. Yes, there's another, like, where it goes back into where it's supposed to be, but that word will come to me after the show.
Equilibrium, we'll use that one.
Yeah, that works.
So, as a rule, do you prefer alternative treatment methods over traditional medications?
Personally, I do, and I love when working with people because, and the reason why it's not coming out of the blue is because the medications have a lot of side effects as well, and some of them are addictive. So it's really a big risk to take them. Um, and I'm all about everybody's on their own journey, whatever works for you, whatever you feel comfortable with. But I am always happy to provide for people who either want to avoid it or are on them and want to see if there's a way to maybe wean off or what. I'm not a doctor. You have to talk with your doctor about weaning off and doing those kinds of things, which is always what I say that, well, I have these options and these alternatives, and that if you would like, you could try and then talk with your doctor about, what it's doing for you and if there's a way to, change things with your medication as you are finding benefits happening to you.
So to that point, where do we strike the right balance between alternative treatments and pharmaceutical drugs?
Yeah, again, I think it's really about the individual trying different things out and what is right for them. For example, so the latest thing that I just found was stem cell patches, which makes stem cells very, very affordable. Whereas before it was something that was very invasive, had to be shot in. Well, I don't know what all had to do, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now it's something, it looks like a band-aid, and you put it on your skin for 12 hours on and 12 hours off. And it's for less than a cup of coffee a day, which is incredible. And we are having people not just anti-age, but age in reverse. There's patents and more than 80 double blind, studies on it. And yeah, so it's a beautiful thing. People are getting their health back.
Age in reverse, sign me up for that.
Yeah,
I need that
right.
right about now. Well, we have just a few minutes left. What advice do you have for people in the audience who are reluctant to pursue therapy for whatever reason?
I would say, you know, I think many times people don't realize that there's something better available, and that and it's also about really finding the right fit for you. I'm not the right fit for everybody, and that's perfectly okay because there is somebody out there who's the right fit for you. So I would say, really consider where you are now. If you don't feel as though you're in a good space mentally, then I would encourage you to look, reach out to different people. Find the person that when you talk to them on the phone or you read their profile, I hear this all the time. People who reach out to me is like, oh, yeah, I've read this on your profile, or you sound like this, or I saw this, and it resonated with them. And find that person, and then see if it doesn't work, then try somebody else. But you can really switch from feel I it's like we're in our own mental prison when we're in that other place. And so I encourage you to find the key to get out of your own mental prison.
I love that line.
Mm,
Reuse that if you don't mind.
absolutely. Take it and run with it.
So there's an obvious topic this time of year we haven't talked about yet, and that's New Year's resolutions. Unfortunately, today's January, what, 3rd, 4th? Many resolutions have already fallen by the wayside, and most won't survive until January 31st. What advice do you have as we begin this new year to encourage families and couples to set the right resolutions so they can have an outstanding year and show shared joy and success and achieve their goals?
I actually stopped doing resolutions when I was a kid. But what I like to do instead is to have a vision board. And so I do a vision board. And even if I don't hit what it is on there, it's just something to put it out there. And now with my partner, we do one together, and so we have our together goals or visions of what we would like to have happen. And when you do that, but there's actually research that shows by Lynn McTaggart. She wasn't doing the research; she wrote about the research, where couples who have a good relationship, they're on the same page, they truly do with the intention make things happen. It's Not woo woo. It's actual research. Look for the intention experiment.
Karin Weiri, thank you for sharing your insights with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
The pleasure was mine. And as always, thank you to our wonderful audience for tuning in to Next Steps Forward. I'm Chris Meek. For more details about upcoming shows and guests, please follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Chris Meek Public Figure and on Twitter at ChrisMeek_USA. We'll be back next Tuesday, same time, same place, with another leader from the world of business, politics, public policy, sports, or entertainment. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next steps forward.